Yeah. Hey, everybody. Yes, I know. I need to fix that. I'll fix it afterward, don't worry. Um, but yeah. Uh, I know this is not, um, it's not a reaction stream today. This is more just a discussion stream that I wanted to have with everybody. So first of all, hey, I hope everybody's doing well today. And well, you can see the title. I'm sure you've all heard the news. Um we're getting more Danganronpa in the year of our Lord 2025, which I don't think any of us really saw coming, did we? Yeah, so I wanted to take the time to just talk about that and share my thoughts. Nagito combined a jump scare in Nintendo Direct. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I was shocked too. I think everybody was. I remember waking up that day and seeing a bunch of messages in the Discord, and everyone was like, oh man, Bubbles is gonna be so... He's gonna freak out when he sees this. And, you know, we had a whole discussion about it, and we were talking about our thoughts on that, but... I really wanted to take the time to... Well, hold on. Yeah, so, new announcement. We have Danganronpa 2x2, or Danganronpa 2x2, or Danganronpa 2x2, or Danganronpa... whatever it ends up being called. So, officially, yeah, we are getting a remake of Danganronpa 2. And the first and most obvious question I had was, why? Like, why do we need this? Maybe it's because I'm kind of I don't know. I'm not really as hyped for remakes as a lot of other people. And for me, Danganronpa isn't even that old of a series. At least not old enough to really necessitate a remake like this. Yes, I know it's over a decade old at this point, like the first game is, but... And this game is 11 years old. Wait. Well, the English version is 11 years old. But my point is that, I don't know, it just feels really soon to be remaking the game and putting it on a whole new... Well, okay, putting it on a whole new console makes sense. You know, letting people have access to it if they don't have, a Vita or Steam or whatever. So, that aspect I understand. What I don't really get is why Danganronpa 2 specifically. Well, okay, I do get Danganronpa 2. It's the most popular in the series, so... I guess they figured it would sell better. Yeah. Yeah, popularity makes a lot of sense as a reason why. It's why... I talked about this in the Discord too, but... It's why we got the Silent Hill 2 remake before we got Silent Hill 1 remake. But we're getting that too. But the difference is that Silent Hill 2 is a standalone story from Silent Hill 1. The original Silent Hill games were interesting because it was the odd-numbered games that had continuity to them, specifically, and the even-numbered games were a lot more standalone and more easily accessible. And of course, Silent Hill 2 has iconic figures like Pyramid Head and the nurses, and James and Maria, and just... It really helped establish what makes Silent Hill Silent Hill. So that remake actually makes sense. Going with that as the first one, and then taking that and remaking the rest of the series. Yeah, I was gonna get to that. So, but not only have they announced that this is a remake of Danganronpa 2 that will be on the Switch, but it has some new content to go with it. Yeah, we're getting an alternate route with this one. Which another of my friends, let me know that it's... I'd say it's kind of a... What do you call it? It's kind of a case of success, maybe? Like we saw with 100 Line, which I haven't played yet. I was thinking about playing that at some point, but that game has over 100 different endings. Some good, some not as good, but, you know, it was ambitious of them to actually try and make a game with that many endings to it, with actual variation to them, and not just, you know, the same ending, but you get a little bit more dialogue, or you get more from this character or this character or whoever. No, we're actually like seeing storylines and conclusions that vary wildly depending on your choices. And I see a lot of people with a lot of hopes for this new remake to have the same, which that would be ambitious. And because it's in a simulation, yeah, it doesn't really affect canon as much, at least not by comparison. Whereas with the alternate routes, we could see maybe a different death order, perhaps. I see a lot of people speculating about that too. I can't believe those Danganronpa, but the death orders decided by a wheel situation is real. Yeah, for real. They actually saw those and made it into a whole new game. So, that's hilarious. But yeah, let's take the time and look through what exactly we're dealing with in this. So, I was actually watching another stream, and they were just as surprised as the rest of us. Nagito jump scare and everything. Alright. Yep. Alright, so here's the article from Spike Chunsoft themselves. Danganronpa 2x2 includes a brand new scenario based on Danganronpa 2 Goodbye Despair. The setting and cast of characters remain the same, but a certain incident triggers a completely different chain of events with different victims, culprits, and tricks. This new scenario offers a volume of content on par with the original. The improved original scenario. The original scenario of Danganronpa 2 has been updated with new visuals and production value for modern game systems. Players will experience the shocking story, revamped to deliver a more beautiful and satisfying gameplay experience. Yeah, so we get this classic scene. But we also have some brand new HD sprites of all our favorite characters, and backgrounds. Like, look at that. Yeah, visually that looks really good. So, like, I understand updating it for modern game systems, like I said. There's I mean, there is a lot of games that kind of fell by the wayside over the years because while the gameplay is good, visually and technically, they are very dated. Not all of them, but a lot of them have like lagged behind in terms of technical limitations. Which, if you didn't know, that doesn't just make a game look more blocky and full of polygons. It actually makes it more likely to crash on modern game systems. Unless you use like an emulator. So it's really hard to run a lot of games from different generations on modern tech. Like, the technical requirements are just not there anymore. So crashes and lag issues and all kinds of other problems are just a lot more common. Which is why I'm not opposed to the idea of a remake to help bring these sorts of games to modern consoles. But, well, I'll get to that later. Hello, welcome. Oh, wait, I didn't mean to zoom in. There we go. For details about the Steam version, visit the Steam page for details, okay? In the acclaimed Danganronpa series, you must use high-speed deductive action to expose a murderer. It all starts when Monokuma, self-proclaimed headmaster, traps extremely talented high schoolers from around the world. What, around the world? They're all in Japan. Only Sonia isn't from Japan. To escape, Monokuma forces the students to play a killing game, blah 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 blah. Yeah, so we know all this. Ooh, anniversary event to feature first trial play for fans. A fan participation anniversary event. Fan participation anniversary even. They forgot the T there. Anniversary even will be held on Saturday, November 29th, 2025, JST, at Bellsal Tokyo Nihonboshi. This event will feature the first trial of play from Danganronpa 2x2, giving fans a chance to experience the game. Okay, so we're actually going to get some trial gameplay in November. Yeah, they snatched the T. Yeah, Danganronpa 2 is my favorite in the series as well. I'm interested to see what they have in mind for this. Yeah, so this is coming out next year. So there's definitely going to be a lot of time, and we're going to see a lot of new developments with that. But here's what I wanted to bring up with this new remake. Because, I mean, it's great. It's great to feel excited about this sort of thing. It has a lot of possibilities. It has a lot of potential. It has a lot of exciting new things that we're going to see. And we're going to get a whole new storyline with this. So, it's definitely going to be, if nothing else, a point of discussion. But the big question I have is, well, like I said, the first big question I had was why. But the second big question I have for all this is this going to be in line with Danganronpa 2? What I mean by that is... excuse me, I need water. What I mean by that is this game actually going to be thematically and narratively in line with what was intended with Danganronpa 2? Because Danganronpa 2 is my favorite entry in the series, but there's a very specific reason for that. Because I know a lot of people who love Danganronpa's characters, but they hate the story, or they think that the story is the weakest aspect to it. But I've never really thought of it that way. I really think of it as a case of the story really being more... Hang on, I think sound alerts are off. Did I turn those off by accident?
Water, or I'll fucking end you!
Oh, there they go. It was kind of late there. What I mean is, the story is... I don't think the story is as bad as a lot of people seem to think it is. Like, I did a whole video on the world building of Danganronpa, and why I think the story is actually very crucial to understanding these things. Like, I'm kind of the reverse of a lot of people, where I feel that the killing game is really secondary to the overarching plot. Whereas a lot of people think that the killing game is the most important aspect of everything. And the overarching plot is more underdeveloped or just not as engaging. Which, I'm not going to browbeat people over that. I understand if you'd prefer the self-contained stories within the games themselves. That's totally fine. But I don't think we can really ignore that these stories actually connect to each other. Like, they have connective tissues and arteries that link them together into a cohesive narrative. And my concern is this new content going to be in line with that? I am not as much of a lore purist as some people would be, especially in other franchises, but I still like to be able to say that these events connect together, that there is cohesion between them. And it's why, if you're a member of our Discord, which, hint hint, you should come and join us, we talk a lot about this stuff, but if you're there, you know that we have frequently complained about Danganronpa 3 and how much it deviates from what was established about Danganronpa in the previous entries, from the games to the novels and side stories to a lot of stuff. And I think it's really important to not add new content that is just there to be new content. You know what I mean? I think it's important to add new things, because what's the point of doing a remake otherwise? But it's important to add new things, but not just to make sure that new thing is actually cohesive with everything that's been established. To actually have it feel like it could have been part of the narrative from the beginning. Where it doesn't detract from everything. Like, it's not... Okay, here's a good example. Like, Resident Evil is a great example of what I'm talking about here. Where... Excuse me. Where, you had the remakes of Resident Evil 1 and 2, which were very good, very well received, and they built on what made the games great, and helped bring those to a new generation. That's excellent. They did a great job with those. I mean, there were some flaws here and there, but that's inevitable, right? Nobody's perfect. No game is ever going to be perfect. But what is a lore purist? Okay, I'll answer that later. But the game itself, I mean, well, some aspects of it are not perfect, obviously. I saw some people who complained about, of all things, the nuclear bomb scene in Resident Evil 2, where in the first game, or in the original game, the bomb actually swept, like the blast swept through Raccoon City, and you could see all the places you've been getting destroyed. Whereas, in the remake, it's just a giant cloud of destruction that covers everything. But that's a mild complaint overall, right? Like, that's just more of an aesthetic view. I heard similar complaints about the nuke scene in the remake of Modern Warfare. Right? But these are small things. Like, it's more of an agree to disagree type thing. But the remake of Resident Evil 3, that is really where I saw a lot of people complaining. Where there were a lot of differences, especially with the game's primary antagonist, Nemesis. Where, okay, for those who don't know, Nemesis was one of the most terrifying things about the original Resident Evil 3. Where, even though that game was made in about a year, I believe, it has one of the best AIs of any video game enemy that I've ever seen. It's smart, it's tactical, it actually plans and reacts to you accordingly. Like, if you try and hide from it, it will come out and chase you. If you run out to the open, it'll switch to a long-range weapon. If you do anything, it will react to you. It knows that long-range attacks are not going to hit you if there's something in its path. So it's going to move, it's going to chase you, it's just going to do whatever it can to actually try and kill you. But the brilliance of the game is that you have the option to either run from it or fight it. And in fighting Nemesis, then you have the option to gain some really rare and really powerful weapons or some great healing items. Or you could end up wasting a ton of resources and leaving yourself vulnerable until you find the next save point. So it's a major benefit in its survival horror genre that Nemesis was made this way. And you can, like, if you want to see a video in depth, I recommend the video that Pastra made. It's really well made and really goes into depth about these issues. But the original Nemesis was really good. The remake Nemesis is more of just a generic monster. And the game does not treat him with any respect. He is not as intimidating, he's not as threatening, he's not nearly as dangerous, and he's not that hard to put down. And when you do put him down, you get very basic items from him, like a grenade, or a health pack, or ammo, or whatever. It's just... Oh, and his design is completely just... It's really bad. It's a really bad... It's a really bad way to take the character, if you ask me. I think it's just... They tried to make him more in line with other Resident Evil bosses, but they ended up making something that didn't feel like Nemesis. They made it into just a generic Resident Evil boss, where it's a giant, like, blob of tentacles. Where the threat from Nemesis comes more in the form of, hey, use this ammo type that you didn't need to use before, and you were never taught to use until this actual fight. That's not using the benefits of survival horror to your advantage. That's a boss fight gimmick. So, do you get what I'm talking about with this? Like, I don't want to see that for this new game with Danganronpa. Which, I highly doubt that they would go that way, but it's just kind of a concern that I have. But to explain what a lore purist is. A lore purist is, in very simple terms, someone who sticks rigidly to canon. Like, who compares everything to what has come before and what was established in the new, or what was established in the old entry. Where it's like, you know, you look at everything that a remake does differently and says, nope, this was bad, this isn't like the old game, therefore it's bad. Or you have to stick rigidly to what was established before in the lore, and if you don't do that, that's also bad. And I think lore purism is not helpful, because it really kind of assumes, hello, because lore purism really kind of assumes that the original game was perfect, and that any changes made in the remake are bad by just virtue of being changes made. You see what I mean? Like, it's like sticking rigidly to what was established before and never going beyond that. Which I don't think is a very good way to approach any remake or any bit of gameplay development in general. Because you get really restrictive and very just limited ideas of what you can do with, like, a remake or a new entry in a series, or you see it a lot more in, like, tabletop games, I think, where, you know, lore purists will say, you can't play a character like this has to be exactly like this. Yeah, we're talking about 2x2. And I think it's really restrictive if we say that a new entry or a new remake or just any new addition to the lore is bad because it's new. That feels more like a logical fallacy to me. But at the same time, if it's new, it's obviously going to come under more scrutiny. And it's going to be something that we need to discuss in depth and say, hey, is adding this beneficial? Is adding this going to make the story better? Is this going to be, you know... Is the game made better by its inclusion? Yeah, so let's go over some things that we think that this could improve. Like, what are some general things that you guys think the remake could do better? Because I think we all agree that a big one is the way Mikan was handled. For those who don't know, Mikan is my favorite Danganronpa character of all. Like, nobody even comes close. I love Mikan. She is such a good character. Like, a lot of people get this idea that she's this, like, you know, fan service character who her only goal is to just fall over or apologize a lot or things like that. But she's not at all. I think she's one of the best written and most complex characters in the game. And yeah, she did get done really dirty. So, what makes Mikan great as a character is that she is very, very morally gray. She is... Yeah, chapter 3. I'll get to that, don't you worry. But what I think makes Mikan great is that she's very morally gray. She is... Well, if you meet her, she comes across as a very shy, very timid, and very anxious character who says and does a lot of things out of fear of being rejected or being hurt. And that really leads to the impression that she had a very difficult upbringing among both her family life and her peers. And you would think that would just make her an object of pathos, but no, the game actually makes her more complicated than that, where it explores darker aspects to her character, like her becoming a nurse was because she had to learn to treat her own injuries because she got hurt so much. Because in her mind, letting people, like, throw mud at her, or throw darts at her, or burn her, or just do things to hurt her in some way, in her mind, that was better than being ignored. Because, and this is just kind of my headcanon with her, but she has a major phobia of being forgotten, or people not caring about her. So, for her, having someone do something to her, even if it hurts, is better than being ignored. And that is very neglected child behavior. Yeah, not being needed. That's a good way to put it. So, that... You would think that would make her, like, just the character you need to protect or whatever. But no, the game actually explores a lot more than that. A lot more than that. It shows that she has very selfish motivations at times, where she became a nurse because she wanted people who couldn't hurt her to depend on her. And she has some dark thoughts at times about people who, you know, who she wants to depend on her because she wants to feel needed. But that doesn't make her evil, obviously. It just makes her a very complicated person. And she really, really just needs to know that people do care about her and do like having her around without her needing to do anything for them. So that aspect to her character I actually really like. I think that's very grounded. I think that's very nuanced in a lot of ways. And I think it's a lot more interesting than just making her an object of pity, or making her another generic villain whose motive was, I was hurt, therefore I'm going to hurt others. Yeah, you could say that again. But you know, a lot of people misconstrue her motivations and just think of her as like a yandere, or just a crazy person or whatever, which is not the case remotely. So, when it comes to Chapter 3, my hope is that they don't abandon that characterization with her. Like, I don't like the despair disease as a motivation. I think it's kind of nonsensical. It's very divorced from reality, so... I don't know. There's no rules with the despair disease. They could just do whatever they want with it. Which is why I felt it was the weakest motivation in Danganronpa 2. Because, you know, something like being stuck somewhere and not having food, yeah, that's simple. That's straightforward. You get that. With the despair disease, you don't know what to expect, so you don't really have expectations. You just know it's going to end badly somehow. And you just kind of have to piece together okay, how does this work? How does that work? And then you actually get to how it happened, and then it becomes, wait, if you can make people remember things, why didn't you just make everybody remember everything? Like, it's one of those weird retroactive plot holes, I think, where if the motivation was to get as many people to kill each other as possible so Junko could have her body back, or have a body to control, like, why not just give everybody their memories back and then have them kill each other? I just thought that was a really confusing and dumb plot development. But that being said, I'm not opposed to what Mikan's characterization is like. I don't like that she's used for fan service, though. Yeah. I don't like that the entire joke with her character is usually, oh, she fell over and she flashed people. Like, I don't think that's necessarily something we should completely remove, per se, though. Because I've talked to Poi about this, and it does fit with someone who wants to feel needed, who does do things for attention. And I'm not saying attention-seeking behavior makes someone a bad person. No. I don't like that attitude, and I don't think that we should view people who do things like that with scorn, or that people who do sexual things to gain attention in some manner are just gross people in general. No. Those are warning signs of someone who has no self-esteem, who has no motive, who has no, like, sense of self-worth, who thinks that their only worth is being something to someone else. Can we even call it fan service if the fans aren't asking for it? I mean, were fans asking for this remake? I'm just saying, this is a very weird direction to take the character. Or take the series, I mean. Yeah, there are better ways to represent that. I think one of the better ways, from what I've seen, was with Corporal Betsy in Fallout New Vegas, which, if you haven't done her quest line, it's about getting her to go to therapy for being attacked by a disgusting piece of garbage. I have to be careful about what I say on Twitch, but you get what I mean, right? Like, the whole point with that quest line is about the damage that event does to people mentally, and why it's important for them to seek help, and not to feel like asking for help makes you weak, or it makes you, you know, broken or defeated somehow. No, it all comes from people who care, who want you to get better. And I would like to see that with Mikan, personally. I don't really know if that's going to happen, but I think it's at least a possibility. And I think it would be interesting to see her character develop beyond, you know, the remembering disease and what that did to her, if she does survive past chapter 3. Because I feel that the big mistake a lot of people make when they watch or play Danganronpa 2 is taking that characterization about her and just kind of... Okay, so a big reason why I don't watch a lot of Danganronpa Let's Plays anymore, I did that a lot when I was younger and I was really getting into the series, but I don't really do that anymore. It's because I feel like people are very... They make very surface-level judgments about a lot of these characters. And granted, some of these characters can be very... What's a good way to put it? Gimmicky, I guess? Kind of... Okay, they're not one note, but they're very, I'm searching for the right words here. They're very, they're not one note in their free time events. Clearly there's a lot more going into them as characters. But within the confines of the plot, within the confines of what most players will see, because if they don't get explored much outside of their free time events. Yeah, that's what I mean. Where you don't see a lot of their more deep characterization outside of those free time events, where what you see with them is a lot of the times very gimmicky. It's more about jokes than it is about character. And I feel like Tetro has really spoiled us in terms of characterization in that regard, where you get very in-depth discussions between these characters that actually make them feel like real people. They actually feel like people having discussions about themselves, where they come from, who they are, and things like that. And it's really when you go back and look at the canon games that you realize that's kind of lacking in a lot of ways, where they feel more focused on their time on the island, or they feel more devoted to their time in Hope's Peak, or they feel like it feels like all they really talk about are the things around them. They don't really get to know each other. They just kind of talk about their situation, and that's it. Which, again, I get that. I understand that from a storytelling perspective. But Tetro has shown that the story really benefits when you have characters actually trying to connect with each other and trying to, like, bond outside of, you know, mutual interest. Okay, I mean mutual interest in the sense of, like, you know, Aoi and Sakura being friends, or Mondo and Taka being friends. Because, okay, I guess I should cite Tetro, because that's what I'm most known for at this point, but if you look at characters like Hama and Irie, they really don't seem like they have a lot in common, but they still bond very well, because Hama is an older brother, and he knows what it's like to have, you know, a little sister around. So he ends up forming a connection with her, and it turns out that there's a lot more to them than just small child star and buff demonologist. You know, they have personalities, interests, and histories that go beyond just what they are. It goes into who they are as characters. And I guess my hope with 2x2 is that we could get something very similar. That we could get maybe some more genuine discussions between these characters, where we could get to know them a little more, outside of just the funny gimmicks that we know them for. Like, oh, Necromar is always shitting, or Gundam is a chuny, or Akane is always eating or fighting things, or Hiyoko's a bully, or Mikan is crying and apologizing, or Terutoru is a pervert, things like that. We get it. We understand that's where a lot of the humor with these characters comes from. But I think it's really beneficial if we actually take the time to explore them as characters outside of the trials. Like, that is my biggest complaint with a lot of Danganronpa and Fangan in general, where you really get most of the characterization exposition right before they die. And that's really a bummer to me, because it means that clearly you had a lot going on with this character in your head, where you had a whole storyline and ideas planned out, you had motivations planned out, you have a backstory, you have family, you have character connections outside of the game. You have all of this in mind with these characters, but we don't get to learn about it until right before they're gone forever from the story. Usually. Like, do you see how these games benefit from us knowing who these people are, outside of funny gimmicks? And yeah, like, I would love it if, like, someone like Mahiru got the spotlight, or Hiyoko got more of a character arc. Because there's a bit of misinformation that goes around a lot where it was said that, you know, Hiyoko was supposed to live longer and Fuyuhiko was supposed to die in chapter 3, but they were switched around at some point. That's not true. That has never been confirmed by any outside sources. All that we really know is that it was at least considered to have Fuyuhiko die in chapter 3. Like, that was just something they thought of during development, and then realized, wait, that would make chapter 2 pointless in retrospect. But my hope there is that, because with chapter 3, you could clearly see that there was a storyline in mind with Hiyoko. There was... Ruined Ren, thank you for the follow. But there was an idea in mind with her as a character, where she was going down a particular route. There was an idea there. Like, it was kind of a case of tell, don't show with her, but at the very least, there was acknowledgement that it was happening. You had Hajime say, well, you know, she's actually trying to bond with us now. She's not completely, like, giving up on everyone, trying to get to know everyone. So, clearly they had something in mind for her. Clearly they wanted to do something with her as a character. Yeah, it was subtle, but... And it was kind of undermined with a lot of the comments she made in chapter 3. But at least there was an idea there. At least they were trying to do something with her as a character. Hello! Welcome, new people. It's great to see you. You know, at least they were trying to do something with her. And with that in mind, I can understand why there's a lot of people who feel that, you know, why they're not happy that she died like she did. Like, I'm not going to say that you should like Hiyoko as a character. We're talking about Danganronpa 2x2, the new remake coming out next year. And we're just going through some, you know, ideas about what we think would be, what we think could be improved. So, I understand why people don't like Hiyoko. I really do. And I'm not going to say that you should like her as a character if you don't. Because, yeah, she is a bully. She's very cruel. She says very, very hateful and hurtful things to people for no reason. And I've always been really put off and confused by the fact that they made her a bully and it really has no bearing on the plot. Like, it doesn't add anything to the narrative. And there's no real consequences for her actions. It's just kind of the way she is. And they don't do anything with it. And I've never yeah, and she engages in animal cruelty, which is not good at all. That is not a sign of a healthy, well-adjusted person. But there's so much with her as a character, I feel, that could have been the basis for some kind of arc. And yeah, I agree with the idea that if she had survived and actually lived to see Mikan's crash out and seen how, you know, seen how angry she was and how much she blamed everybody and felt alienated and felt hurt. Like, if Hiyoko were alive then and Mikan just let loose on her, I think that would really, like, that could put her in a very different mindset. It could get her to reconsider everything. You know, just as one idea. Just as one possible route for her character. Which I think would be interesting, if nothing else. Because there could be a lot more, like, okay. So, writing tip for anyone who either wants to make a fangan or who is writing in general. You are not beholden to character behaviors that you establish early on. Like, that goes for fangan writers, for fanfic writers, and for writers in general. You are not beholden to what is established in canon. You can take what is established about them or you establish about them, and you can go in whatever direction you want. Like, I've seen some people who have this idea when it comes to characterization and character direction that you have to stick rigidly to what was established about a character early on, or, you know, when you have a character who is like, say, a jerk, or a character who's enemies with somebody, like a rivalry, or jealousy, or some kind of conflict between them. And it kind of feels like there's two main camps that develop with those. Where the first camp is, clearly they desire each other carnally, and their rivalry is based entirely in that mutual desire. Come on, we've all seen it. We've all seen that characterization. We all know it. Or the second one is that they just get worse, where there's no reconciliation. There's, okay, thank you for stopping by. Doomed Yaoi moment, yeah. Where there's no reconciliation, there's no development, it's just continuation of what is established. And you know, it's like when you talk to people about a storyline idea you have in mind about these characters going from like rivals to friends, or enemies to lovers, that kind of thing. And the response you get is, no, that would never happen. They could never find mutual common ground. They could never, like, connect with each other. And it's like, why not? As the writer, you can do whatever you want. As the writer, you basically have free reign to do whatever you want and say whatever you want about these characters. You know, so long as it's in line with what you've established and what actually makes these characters these characters. Because, you know, TV tropes always talks about things like the distress ball, or the jerk-ass ball, or the dumbass ball, or, you know, the distress ball. Those moments where characters feel out of character for the sake of the plot, where they should logically be doing something else, but because the plot needs them to act a certain way, then they end up acting that way. You don't have to have it happen that way, though. You can have them, like, you know, have natural development. You can have them go down a completely different route. You can have them actually talk and find common ground and develop and become friends. Where you can do anything. I hate when characters add a character for the plot. Yeah, for real. And that is always my biggest concern whenever you have, like, a remake happen and some new content come out. And, you know, there's a new idea, but you have to ask, is this new idea going to be in line with what we've established? Okay, for another example, and I'm going to put spoilers on this for anyone who has not played Persona 3. So this is your spoiler warning right now. Feel free to mute the stream. If I go like this, that means the spoiler... Oh, sorry. That means the spoiler alert's over. So, oh, hold on. Okay, so, yeah. This is your spoiler warning. For anyone who hasn't played Persona 3. I do recommend playing that game on your own. But I am going to talk about what happens after the ending. So, if you don't want to hear about that, I recommend muting the video until I delete this bit of text. So, what happens in Persona 3 is that, at the end, the party is confronted with Nyx, right? Where you have, you know, the oncoming embodiment of death and humanity's collective desire for death called Erebus, who is trying to unite with her and bring about the end of the world. And it's not that people don't want to live, it's that humanity's collective death urge is so strong that it's bringing her in. And she's too powerful to kill, so the only recourse is for the protagonist to use their own soul as a seal to keep Nyx from reaching Erebus and ending the world. And the Great Seal uses up all his health in the process. So, at the end of Persona 3, the protagonist dies. Yeah. Like, their body dies, but from what I recall, they still, like, exist. Like, their soul is still out there, used to seal Nyx away. And what really, really made people upset with the post-game DLC called The Answer, what really put a lot of people off was Yukari's behavior in that one. Where, you know, Yukari, in the base game, she was kind of standoffish. She was kind of not the nicest person, but, you know, that was for understandable reasons, you know? She wasn't really good around people. She'd lost her dad. She was very... she had a bad history with grieving. She just did not, like, you know, handle death very well. So, when she ended up losing the protagonist, who, depending on your choices, was either her good friend or her boyfriend, pretty much, she didn't take it well. And she became very angry. She became very hostile to everybody. She accused them of not caring about them as much as she does. She became a very, like, me, this is all about me kind of character. And that lasted for a good portion of The Answer. And I remember seeing a lot of people who were like, this made me hate Yukari so much. But then she was like, you know, at the, I think the 2/3 point, she just broke down crying and finally explained why she was so angry and hostile to everybody. And it's because she was grieving. Because she didn't know how to process her grief all over again. Where she'd lost someone that she was close to after she'd lost her dad. So, like, she had no idea how to process these emotions. And as a reminder, she's still a teenager. She was never going to process her emotions like a mature adult. And I don't get why people were so harsh to her over this. Well, okay, I get it. You know, from a basic, you're a very mean person type of thing. But, you know, she's a child. She's still a child trying to process the loss of so many people that she was close to and that she cared about. So, of course she was going to lash out. Of course she was going to, you know, say things mean to people. Especially because her mother is not supportive of her at all. Like, she's way more concerned about filling the void in her life by, you know, meeting a bunch of different guys and getting married to people she doesn't even know that well. You know, she's stuck in a major cycle of, you know, jumping from one relationship to another just so it'll fill the void in her heart. And she doesn't really care that much about Yukari's feelings. Yeah. When it's like, you know, when it's a teenage girl especially who does something wrong, then suddenly it's like they're the worst person who's ever lived, blah, 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 blah. Like, give them a break, please. They're children. Children do not process their emotions well. That's basic. If you've never been around a kid, then of course that's gonna feel like the worst thing in the world, but it's gonna feel like the worst thing in the world to the kid who's upset. Especially when they have very valid reasons to feel upset, like from the loss of a friend or a family member, or who just makes a basic mistake. It's just very... I don't know. I've never been fond of that kind of thing. Okay, spoiler time over. So, my hope is that we don't get something like that in 2x2. Where, you know, there's a new development with a certain character, and that ends up making them seem like the worst person ever. Yeah, Mabel is 10. But you see what I mean, right? But yeah, the major issue with having very nuanced characters is that you need to present that nuance very clearly and unambiguously at times. Because as I've said, a lot of people take a very surface level interpretation of characters. Especially when it's their first time, you know, experiencing the story, experiencing the plot, and experiencing these characters. And we're undoubtedly going to get an influx of people who've never played Danganronpa in their lives, who are going to be seeing these characters for the very first time. So, oh man, this is going to be so many people's first introduction to Nagito. Oh my god. Okay, I just realized, between this and the Homestuck animation, we are resurrecting early 2010s Tumblr. Oh, we're recreating it. We are bringing it back from the grave. We are introducing a whole new generation to things that we thought we had moved past. Oh my god. Ugh. Anyway, I'm not going to dwell on that too much. But yeah, this is going to be a lot of people's character, yeah. Yep. New era of Nagito X Sans. 2010 is back in business. Oh man. We're getting a 2010 revival in 2025, in 2026. How do we feel about that, people? But yeah, my point with this is that I really hope what we get out of this is better characterization and more exploration about these characters. And more genuine, like, discussion between them. And more discussion had about them. Because I think a thing that really bothers me about Tetro, like with Tetro's fan base, is that Von Babbitt really goes out of her way to talk about these characters and talk about their struggles and talk about their life experiences and what they go through and how they feel about many things. Right? Like, that's my favorite part of, that's my favorite part of Tetro, where we actually learn about them and see what they're like and how they feel about a lot of things. And then there's a lot of parts of, okay, I'm not going to say a lot. There's a significant portion of the fan base who their concern is more about shipping. Or their concern is more about who's a good guy, who's a bad guy. Or because a character did a certain thing a certain way, this makes them somehow inherently evil. When the entire point is that these are confused, traumatized children who have no idea why they're here, being forced to participate in a game that they wanted no part of. And a lot of them are going to do things that are not in line with Danganronpa canon. They're not going to do the things that we're familiar with. Like, Watery is probably the best example. And I'm not going to spoil that for anyone who hasn't seen it, but yeah, my ire is not at her. It's at the people who put her into the game in the first place. And that's really the hard part when you have discussions about, yeah, she's a very complicated character. She's TA's favorite character from Pink. And I can absolutely see why. Yeah, for real. And I appreciate Tetro because it helps you see how complicated these characters can be. And that's a lot harder to appreciate when you have them die early on, right? But we got the next best thing, and they were never forgotten about. Like, my little brother was the first one who introduced me to Danganronpa. And, like, he was a fan of it all the way back when they were doing, those translated Let's Plays on the Something Awful forums. You know, back before it got an official English release. Like, he was a fan of it back then, so he knew Danganronpa before it was popular. Yeah. So he really got me into the series early on. Yeah, he's an OG. So he's the one who got me into the series. And he felt like one of the major dividing lines between the characters in TTH versus Super Danganronpa 2 is that it feels more like the characters in 2 actually mourn for the people that they lost a lot more, as opposed to the people in the first game who kind of brush past it. Like, they don't really experience a lot of grief in comparison. I mean, at least in the confines of the first game. Like, the sadness is pretty self-contained to the trials in a lot of ways. So, I get what he's saying with that. Like, I get what he meant with that. But that was years ago, so we've had a lot of things that have come and gone since then. Yeah, for real. Well, he and Sayaka weren't really childhood friends, but he knew her in middle school. Like, he knew of her, but he never really talked to her. Yeah. I was gonna get to that too. Like, he is very... Yeah, that was actually one of my favorite moments in Danganronpa 3, where they actually took the time to acknowledge, hey, no, Makoto actually has really bad survivor's guilt, and he feels like he shouldn't be alive when so many of his friends died. So that was actually one of the best things that they did in that. And it's actually one of the moments in the dub that doesn't feel like a complete joke. Like, it still works. So, I like that aspect of it. Like, I liked seeing that Hiyoko tried to make a memorial for Mahiru. I like that you could walk in on Fuyuhiko crying over the loss of everyone. I like that, you know, everyone's deaths actually matter. I think the only ones who really grieve post-trial are Hina and Taka, unless I'm forgetting something. No, yeah, I think you're right. I think that is the case. And that really feels like a missed opportunity in retrospect, doesn't it? Like, even V3 had problems with this, I gotta say. Because, yeah, you got occasional mentions, and you did get that really beautiful scene of Shuichi promising to carry on Kaide's legacy. But you didn't really get a lot of long-term mourning like you did with, No, yeah, you didn't really get a lot of long-term mourning. Like, obviously Himiko was really upset after Chapter 3, but, you know, that was more a case of her facilitating her character development. Which, that wasn't bad, but I think that, you know, I love Tetro. I really love Tetro. I'm just saying it now. I love Tetro. So I'm gonna keep comparing things to Tetro because Tetro is really good. It does all the things that I wanted Danganronpa to do. Like, it actually explores grief and heartbreak and the trauma that would come with being in a killing game and seeing people who you got close to die. Like, it's the fact that people are dying that leads to the story developing like it does. Whereas the driving force with the canon games tends to be, how do we get out of this place? Or how do we defeat the mastermind? In Tetro, that doesn't even cross everybody's mind. Because they don't know who the mastermind is. They don't know how they're gonna get out. I mean, they're trying to get out, but it's more like, how do we survive this? You know, they're very like, you know, short-term, small picture kind of thinkers. Yeah, for real. And I appreciate that Danganronpa has people who actually blame the mastermind for everything. Where, yeah, for real. Despair Time is also a great example. I can't wait for that to continue too. But I think it would be beneficial if, you know, if this remake is successful and we maybe got more remakes in the future. I think what I want the most is that we have more actual grieving, more focus on them discussing people they've lost, more discussion on things like, you know, the people who aren't here with us anymore, the people who aren't around to actually hang out with us. Like, I'm not going to ask anyone to, you know, go in depth about it if they don't want to, but has anyone here lost anybody close to them? Like a family member or a friend or anyone like that? Even just, like, I don't know, a content creator that you followed a lot who just is gone now. Like, do you have experience with that kind of thing? Yeah. I lost my grandma too a few years ago. And it's a weird feeling, isn't it? Like, when you know someone is there, and you know someone has been there for years, if not your entire life, where, like, they're a constant presence in your life somehow, or you just know that they're going to be there, and then one day they're just not. Where there's just, like, an empty space now. And that can happen even if people with friends that you haven't known for very long, but who become part of your routine. Where when they disappear, you notice it. You feel their absence. Like, even if you don't know them particularly well, they're not there anymore. And I think Danganronpa is at its best when it actually goes into that. When it goes into that feeling, when it talks about it, when it's willing to engage with that, and actually lets you feel that loss too. I'm the only one among my siblings and cousins who can even remember my gran, because most of them were very little or not even born when she passed. Yeah, I get that too. Hey, I'm sending you hugs too, okay? You know, I'm sorry you had to go through that. It sounds really difficult, and I get it. But, like, it's a hard experience to have if you've never actually lost anybody in your life. If you've never, you know, never had to go through that kind of thing. It's something that you don't really understand on a personal level. It's something that is harder to relate to, I think. But I think that's also something that really makes stories like these beneficial to experience, because it lets you experience that in a controlled manner, where you can choose to engage with it and you can choose to disengage if you want to. While with real-world mourning and grieving, it's gonna be an ongoing process where some days you're gonna feel like you're over it, and some days you're not. Some days it's just gonna feel like it's all come back all over again, and you're gonna start mourning them for days or weeks again. I actually know a really sad story. I'm sorry, I know this is a very sad topic, but I think this is something that Danganronpa would benefit from if we talked about it more. Um, so have you ever heard of Richard Feynman? He was one of the scientists who worked on the Manhattan Project, and he was basically one of the biggest physicists in the 20th century. Like, a lot of physics knowledge that we have today comes from him. Like, he proposed ideas for things like nanotechnology. Like, he gave people ideas, and he he was just a really charismatic, really cool guy to a lot of people who knew him. You know, he just sounded like a really great dude all around. But there's a really sad story that gets passed around where his wife actually died of cancer while he was away on the Manhattan Project. Which, if you don't know, that was when the US was building the atomic bomb. This was right in the middle of World War II. So you had a bunch of scientists out in Los Alamos, New Mexico, who were building this, weapon that they didn't even know if it would work, but they were putting their all into it. So Feynman was out there, and he didn't get to see his family a lot. So his wife was diagnosed with cancer while he was out there, and she passed away while he was out working on that. Like, he still talked to her, obviously, but it's one of those situations where work takes you away from the people who you should be most close to. And there was one point where he was walking through town, and he walked by a clothing store, and in the window he saw a dress, and he thought to himself that his wife would like that. And that was when he remembered that she was gone. Like, she just wasn't around anymore. And he cried about that. It's really sad. It's easy to feel like scientists are just, nerds whose entire life is just devoted to their field of research, but no, he had a family out there, man. And I think that's the thing that really hits hard with stories like this and characters in Danganronpa, especially when you actually get to know them and you understand what they have to lose. And fangans and remakes both would be significantly benefited by having discussions like that. Welcome back. Like, we would benefit so much more from the emphasis on tragedy and storytelling if we had that kind of, emphasis on, who these people are that we're actually losing, and not just the funny gimmicks that they have. Like, Danganronpa is, like, at its best when it has comedy, too. You gotta counterbalance it. Like, when the humor works in Danganronpa, it's hilarious. It is some absolutely grade A dark comedy. But I also feel like the humor can be really distracting, especially during the trial. Fun fact, in childhood it's fun because you get to say a lot of hellos. In adulthood it's sad because you have to say a lot of goodbyes. Yeah. But there are hellos in adulthood too. You always get new opportunities. If you don't think you get new opportunities, then that just means you haven't found those opportunities yet. But when it comes to things like, okay, if you're gonna balance comedy and tragedy in a story, you really gotta, like, pick and choose where you're gonna have it and how you're gonna have it. Because there have been a lot of moments in Danganronpa, in both canon and fangans, that have made me laugh a lot, that have made me just have to pause to catch my breath, which I think a lot of you who were around for Tetro will remember, where TA and I had to pause because we were just cracking up so much. Like when Ono had the crowbar, and she's like, I hope we get along, or when Mikawa found Ogura's Yuri collection. Like, those were hilarious. Absolutely grade A comedy. But confine your lore, that one too. But at the same time, you also have comedy that doesn't work nearly as well. Where you have, you know, where we're supposed to be talking about the murder, and we're supposed to be talking about the evidence that we have, but we're instead going to be devoting time in the trial to a stupid joke. Or some unnecessary bit of side commentary. And that doesn't work because it feels like a distraction, or it feels like the story's spinning its wheels. Or we have characters whose gimmick is that they are a certain way, and they make inappropriate comments at times. And, you know, I'm the kind of person who feels like when a story gets serious, it should stay serious. Or at least stay mostly serious. Don't undermine the seriousness. Like, comedy can absolutely, like, be beneficial to a serious situation. Like, some mild levity isn't a bad thing. Tomba's poison theories are the only exception. Okay, yeah, I'll grant you those were pretty funny. But because those were adding to the trial. Because we didn't know. It could have been poison for all we know. Also, I have a soft spot for those, personally, because if you remember in the second chapter when I was like, I was making fun of that, and I was like, their head is missing from their body. Maybe they were poisoned. And Apollo hit me in the head with a prophecy ball that day. When it came to chapter 3, and that wasn't even out yet. Because even though they're silly moments, they're still taken seriously. Yeah, like, it's funny when she talks about poison, but she's still, like, theorizing about how the murder could have happened. Yeah, she was trying. You could see the hamster wheel in her brain working hard. Whereas with others, yeah, that joke did not age well literally one chapter later. I'm tempted to just go back and make, like, a whole compilation video of me and TA, like, accidentally prophesizing things. Me when I make the comic relief character actually lock in. See, that's good. I actually really like that. Like, okay, another example. Haruhiko became one of my favorite characters in Danganronpa Another because he locked in after a while. Because he didn't stay the silly joke character. Like, he's a moron, sure, but he's not completely stupid. Like, he's not obliviously stupid to his surroundings. He actually, like, you know, tries to engage with things. He tries to participate in the trial or in discussions and things like that. He's just not very smart. But, you know, in his free time events, he actually feels survivor's guilt and blame over Kyoka's death. And he feels like, you know... One of my favorite moments in Danganronpa Another is actually when he and Teruya are having an argument about what's better, actually trying to find a way out or just hoping rescue will come. Like, they actually got into a heated argument over this and presented their points really well. And these were the two characters who were pretty much joke characters in comic relief up to that point, where they actually had a real discussion about it. They actually had a real argument over it. And I didn't see that coming. I really didn't. But it was good. I liked it, and I wanted more of it. Like, I think these stories are good when characters are allowed to be dynamic. They aren't just limited to being funny gimmick characters. Like, comedy is a good way to endear us to a character, but being funny doesn't have to be the be-all end-all of their personality. Especially when, being funny would be detrimental to the actual emotions of the scene, because that's when it turns into bathos. That's when you get into, you know, undermining the actual emotions of the scene, because it kind of feels like you're unwilling to engage with those emotions. You know what I mean? So, another big thing that I wanted to talk about, and this is probably the biggest one that I've seen people both contemplate and also make memes about, so you know it's serious. Could Hajime actually die in this? Like, could our protagonist from the original game end up being a casualty in... No. I'm sorry, but no. Like, I know people would want to see something like that. They think it'd be cool. They think it'd be interesting to see, like, a complete shift in a protagonist. But I'm sorry, I don't think it's gonna happen. And the simple reason is, Hajime is way too important to the plot for him to actually die. Like, he's got way too much relevance. We aren't kiting Hajime. Yeah. He goes from being a science casualty to a simulation casualty. Is it bad that I said I would like if Hajime getting the Kade treatment? Okay, so here's why I don't really think it's gonna happen. Yeah, so, okay. Let's be real here, though. Like, okay, I don't think it would be impossible for anyone to take over the protagonist role at all. Like, I really don't. I think it's a cool idea. I think it would be really interesting to see... Oh. Zoyo2, thank you for the follow. But I don't think it would be a bad idea if we could have, like, a completely different protagonist. Not at all. I think that a lot of people in this cast could take up that mantle. I think it could be Mahiru, or Sonia, or Chiaki, or... But think about it, Bubbles, if he perishes, he can continually haunt the narrative, and we would be getting doomed yaoi with Nagito. Okay, but here's my counter-argument. How would the story progress, though? Like, how much of the story would benefit from Hajime actually dying first? Or dying early on? Like, how much would that change? Because I feel like that would be a completely different story at that point. Because so much of the finale of Danganronpa 2 hinges on the fact that Hajime is Izuru Kamakura, right? Like, so much of that story is based on how he needs to create his own future, how his actions in trying to become talented or basing his self-worth on talent were ultimately based on, you know, how much he didn't like himself and how much he felt worthless as a result. And that was exploited by everyone around him, from the steering committee to Junko. At least in the game itself. DR3 had its own ideas, but that's neither here nor there. My point is that having Hajime as the protagonist feels like... Or having someone else as the protagonist, I don't know. I feel like that would change the story way too much and make all of those discussions kind of harder to emphasize. And if it were focused on someone else, that might as well just be a different story altogether. And yeah, like, how would the characters come back if Hajime did die? Yeah, because remember, they established that Hajime, yeah, he was functionally no longer himself in the real world. The Hajime we met in the Neo World program was a reconstruction that it put together from his old memories. Hajime in the real world is Izuru. So if he dies, then Hajime dies for good. It just goes back to Izuru at that point. So that would have massive ramifications for the rest of the storyline, and I don't know if those would be really as nuanced in comparison. You know, because if you're going to focus on a Okay. I'm saying this because, you know, this is working off the assumption that a new route would necessarily be canon, but I don't think it would be. I think it'd just be a different route. Because you could have multiple endings in a game, but only one is canon, right? Like, you had the original, not the original, the newer XCOM series, where you had the first XCOM, which had a bunch of different endings, but then you had XCOM 2, which established that the bad ending is actually canon. So, the actions of your party in the first XCOM were destined to fail. So, you might as well start with the second game, I guess. I'm joking, obviously, but, you know, the idea of killing off the protagonist sounds like it'd be a cool story idea, but you really have to contemplate how that would work. Like, you need careful consideration on that sort of thing. You can't just do it because it sounds like a cool idea. Like, I had arguments with this about people when it came to Despair Time, especially, where some people were arguing, well, you know, Teruko could die. You never know. She could be a Chapter 2 casualty. And I'm like, no. No, she wouldn't be. That doesn't make any sense narratively. Hey, welcome! We're talking about the possibility of Hajime dying and why I don't buy it. Yeah, I just don't really see the idea of... I think one thing I do hope is that they fix some dialogue to make it obvious that Hajime struggles with English and isn't an illiterate idiot who doesn't know what an octagon is. Yeah. We had made so many jokes about that. Poi especially did a good job establishing that it's an issue with English and Hajime is Japanese. So that's the issue there. Yeah, your meme of that is really popping off from what I've seen. But I was saying, like, from a narrative standpoint, I don't think there's really a lot of good places to kill off a protagonist, if you're gonna do it. Like, okay, so, this is just my opinion. You feel free to disagree with me on this, but I think there's only really 2 or 3 good ways to actually have a protagonist bite it in a story. The first is right at the beginning, or at least at the end of the first act, where you establish that this character is, you know, a leader, or they are at least important in some capacity, and then you have them die early on to show that, you know, nobody's safe, or they weren't actually the leader that we needed, or them passing the torch off to our actual protagonist. And then you can have it at the end, where, you know, the hero's journey is complete, so they die. Or, the rarer one that I've seen, you have them die at the halfway point, where I've not died, then at least pass the torch on to somebody else. Where, you know, it's a careful balancing act where you build up the protagonist, but you also build up their potential replacement, focus character. And it's not really dying per se, but I did see an example of this pointed out by Red from OSP, where you had the protagonist of the show Reboot, who was booted out of the show in season 3, where he was a non-factor at that point. So he's not around to protect the system because he's a computer program designed to protect them from the virus Megabyte. So he's not around anymore, and so his sidekick Enzo has to step in and try to be the hero, but he's a kid. He can't do it himself. And season 3 gives him a whole arc about growing up, about learning to be, capable of fighting Megabyte, but also about the sacrifice it took to actually become that kind of fighter, and how maybe it wasn't worth it. How maybe this isn't the kind of person he should be, but he still needs to be the one to fight Megabyte. So they made a whole arc out of this that hasn't really been done a lot in other stories from what I've seen, which is kind of a shame. But the point here is that, you have an established character in some capacity, where you have, it's really hard to convincingly kill off a protagonist at, say, the 20% mark, or the 45% mark, or anything that's not like a beginning, middle, or end. It's gonna feel jarring, it's gonna feel difficult to actually justify in a lot of cases. And some audiences are straight up not gonna buy it. They're not gonna believe that you actually did that. Yeah, that's another thing too. We really need to keep that in mind. Kodaka is overseeing this. He is involved with it, but he's not the writer. So he's not the one personally involved with these characters like he was in Danganronpa 2, in the original. So we're kind of left up in the air with how well these characters are going to be handled. And I'm not saying that a new person couldn't handle this. They very much could. But it's going to depend a lot on how much they actually know about Danganronpa as a whole. Because I think that the ending of Danganronpa 2 is, no joke, one of my favorite endings to any game that I've played. Like, I saw it at a very formative time in my life, so it's really important to me. And I really hope this remake does it justice. And I am also going to be the first who sees any narrative or writing issues with that ending and point them out in some capacity. Yeah, it's being written by the same person who wrote 100 Line. Yeah. Well, to be fair, not every writer is going to be, universally good or universally bad. Every writer makes bad stories at some point. It's inevitable, and you shouldn't feel bad about the fact that you do it. It's that you should look at it and say, okay, how can I do better next time? Because the writer of one of my favorite movies, Arrival, has actually made some really awful movies as well. So just because someone has, like, kind of a mixed bag reputation with writing, that doesn't necessarily mean that their writing is going to be bad overall. That's a safer bet to make when you look at someone who kind of has a reputation for making universally bad stories. Like, okay, I'm making a lot of comparisons in this video, but that's what I do best. Hey, Poi, welcome. So, as another example, you look at someone like David Cage and Quantic Dream. Like, Quantic Dream games, they look really good, right? Well, we had a bit of a discussion already, but I'm just going through a lot of stuff right now. Right now, I want to talk about the possibility of different routes in this. So, you look at Quantic Dream games, right? They're really pretty. They look nice. They're well animated most of the time. They have great atmosphere. They have, if nothing else, interesting ideas. But the gameplay is pretty simplistic, which isn't a bad thing. No. The big problem is that the writing is bad a lot of the time. Yeah, Detroit Become Human. That is a perfect example. Detroit Become Human, it's an ambitious game. I'll give him that. It was an ambitious game to talk about and discuss these things. The problem... Okay, DBH has a lot of problems, but... Okay, its biggest is that it tries way too hard to be a civil rights allegory by just copy-pasting everything about the civil rights onto androids, which is not how that works at all. And it's a French dude trying to talk about American history. But no, the biggest issue with DBH from a narrative perspective is that a lot of its writing choices just kind of feel like twists for the sake of twists. You know what I mean? Where you have, should I spoiler this one too? I don't know if you can really spoil our Quantic Dream game because it's already pretty spoiled. Like, the best aspect of DBH is definitely the relationship between Connor and Hank. And, you know, when you actually get them to talk and how their friendship worked. Yeah. So, yeah, Kara's storyline in that one is that she is a robot maid, and she's recruited by this piece of garbage named Todd to take care of him and his daughter Alice. And Todd is basically, you know, he's abusive, he's cruel, he spends most of his days not working and just getting high, and he constantly verbally and physically abuses Alice. So, one night when he really loses it, Kara breaks her programming and either kills him or incapacitates him enough so that she and Alice can go on the run and try to find help. And the storyline is presented as an android woman taking care of a human girl, where she is disproving the idea that androids don't have emotions, that they can't be human. And she is actually expressing care and concern and things like that. And then near the end of the game, it's revealed that Alice herself is actually an android, and that Todd's real daughter was taken away by his wife. So he got an android to serve as a replacement for her. Which not only completely undermines Kara's entire storyline, but it raises so many plot holes and contradictions in that storyline as well, because all the requirements that a human child would have, an android child would not. It's a completely pointless and damaging twist that doesn't need to be there. And this is not an optional one either. This is something that's part of the base storyline. This is something you find out no matter what you do. But yeah, about that. Why the hell are people mass-producing android children? Oh god, that's a good question. Yeah, it just raises more questions than answers, doesn't it? But I think the worst plot twist in the entire game is if Marcus dies and Connor becomes the new leader of the android rebellion or civil rights movement or whatever. where, I can't believe this. So, in that ending, it's revealed that CyberLife, the company that makes the androids, actually planned this. And their plan was to create a fake revolution in order to usurp government power and allow them to pick up the pieces in the ensuing chaos. So, one of the game's endings tells us that civil rights movements are actually a corporate plot to take over and rule everything. Which is some dangerous conspiracy theory level topic. That is some dangerous conspiracy theory level nonsense. And I know it's a secret, hard to reach ending, but the fact that they actually have that as an ending carries a lot of really, really bad implications, and I wish it was not there at all. And even going beyond the issues with the civil rights aspects of DBH, you have games like Heavy Rain, where a lot of the plot developments and things that look like foreshadowing just don't matter in the long run. They're never explained. They're just there to be there. They're just very, like... I don't know. I don't know why they're there. Are they red herrings? Are they plot holes? Are they supposed to be there, but David Cage just forgot to have any follow-up to them? I got no idea. Like, why does Ethan have blackouts and occasionally wake up with an origami figure in his hand? I don't know. He stops having blackouts after a while, so it's just never explained. It never shows up. It never matters to the plot in any way. It's just there to hint that maybe he's the origami killer in Heavy Rain, but no, there's never any follow-up on that. Oh, I never thought about that. I'm thinking maybe that's the early choice, which reveals that they're in a game and Chiaki's the traitor early on. You know, yeah, that could be really interesting, I think. I think it's funnier if something dumb causes the plot to diverge. Like, imagine Nagito slipping on a banana skin and it reveals he was plotting a murder. Yeah, so... Okay, that's actually an interesting idea, too. Like, if we could prevent canon murders through certain choices, that would be really cool. I think that'd be really interesting. Yeah, maybe. Where you have a lot, you know... I mean, they did establish right from the beginning in the original game that the characters had lost their memories, but they never specified how or why. They were just on an island, and they forgot about everything. But I'll be honest, I knew right from the beginning that they were probably in a simulation, because the game opened up with, like, glitching, and and that door with, like, pixels and Tron lines on it. So, I kind of figured that a simulation had to be involved somehow. They were not subtle about that. So, maybe this game would actually be better. Yeah, but they didn't know. They didn't know, did they? No, they didn't. They just woke up and found themselves in a classroom, and then they were on an island. So, that aspect makes sense. Like, in-universe, that makes sense. They don't have, like, the context that we do. But I kind of hope maybe the surprise is a little more subtle. Like, maybe it opens up to a hallway instead. Like, Hajime doesn't remember how he got there or something. You know, make it ambiguous without being too confusing or too obvious. That kind of thing. Because the plot twist that they were in a simulation, yeah, that's good. And I don't think that a plot twist being obvious or easy to spot early on necessarily makes that a bad thing. It's all about the execution, right? Pardon the pun, because Danganronpa. But I think that the story would benefit a lot if we had a bit more ambiguity in that regard, where the game is just kind of weird, and that keeps you wondering, okay, what's going on here? How does this work? And then it's like, oh yeah, we're in a computer simulation. That makes sense. It's something called subtlety. Excuse me, I have the hiccups. Hang on. Yeah, so maybe the routes would be split in like split between the idea of either they know they're in a simulation or they don't until the very end. I randomly getting reminded of a dumb game that was released called The Quiet Man. It had some dumb questions that were never answered, like why does one of the characters called Lala look exactly like the main character's deceased mother? Or why does the main character get freaking powers during the last fight? Yeah. Yeah, so if they did find out why they were in a simulation, that would kind of invalidate the motivations for, like, Chapter 3. And it would make a lot of things a lot harder to justify in that case, because if they knew they were in a simulation, like if they were told, like, if you die in the simulation, you die in real life, then that would really put a lot of them off from trying to kill, right? At least, ideally it would. SAO style? Oh god. Well, at least this one doesn't have a microwave going through their brain. It just shuts their brain down. Do you imagine the motives being the same? Probably, yeah. I'd imagine so. You know, they'd probably be the same, but, like, Monokuma just, like, dropping the pretenses and being like, this is a virtual world, I can do whatever I want. Like when he revealed that he had 10 to the 60 copies of himself. Except for chapters 4 and 5. Yeah. Well... No. I think they would still be there. Yeah. Or Monokuma just goes, Tetrasaw with the motive. Oh, no. No. That'd be dark. No sleep till someone die. Oh, no. Oh, no, Chiaki. She'd be the most weakened by all that. Yeah. Could you imagine how different this game would be if Nagito was the first Blackened? Like, if they actually got that right? Or he actually was able to carry out his planned murder plot? Could you imagine if Nagito became, like, the representation of Hajime's self-esteem issues? Like, he haunts the narrative, but he's also there reminding Hajime that ultimates are better than him. Who did Nagito even plan to kill? I don't think he really had anybody in mind. I think he just wanted to kill somebody. And it was the imposter who, like, shoved him aside and was in a position to get stabbed by Teru. That's what led to that. Yeah, they were the closest to him. Mm-hmm. So whoever it would end up being, you know, it's hard to say, really. Although that would be really horrifying, wouldn't it? Like seeing how. Oh, here's a horrifying thought. Could you imagine if like things happen as they did in canon, and then the lights go out, and then Nagito actually pulls off his plan and he stabs somebody with a knife, but to make sure that he's like, not immediately suspicious because he'd be covered in blood. What if he like uses the dark as an opportunity to like splatter blood onto a bunch of different people and like throws the knife somewhere, so everybody feels like something wet land on them, and nobody can definitively say who is the killer and who isn't just from that. So the lights come on and just there's somebody dead and everyone's like covered in blood. Like something like that, maybe. Which, if that doesn't end up happening, please, anyone feel free to use that as part of their Fangan. I think that'd be quite a surprise. Plot twist, Hero succeeds in stopping Nagito. That'd be interesting, too. Nagito trips over someone's feet and accidentally stabs himself in the chest. I mean, knowing his luck, that wouldn't even kill him. I think Chiaki being the first victim in the real of her being the traitor, I can imagine everything thinking with Chiaki killed, that means no more killing game. Maybe. Do you know what I really hope for, personally? Like, regardless of which route it is, I would really love more events that show that Sonia is actually an important member of this group. Like, unambiguously. Because I think out of every character in this entire game, she has gotten the most, like, claims that she does the least and that she should have died or whatever. Which I disagree with completely, and I don't like that kind of speculation at all. But, like, well, of course I want Mikan to live, but I'm talking about Sonia. Sonia and Gundam attempt a ritual summoning. Oh no, they would though. But what I mean is, like, with investigations and stuff like that. Because I've always hated those, like, posts that people have made where it's like, I wish Sonia had died so that Kazuichi and Gundam could get more development. Like, first of all, that's fridging. That's bad writing. Do not advocate for fridging. That is fridging. Fridging is bad. Second of all, Sonia has more agreements with Hajime in the trials than I think any other character. So she is a major part of how they managed to reach the proper conclusions. Yeah, it would also be cool to see someone point out that Kazuichi's behavior towards Sonia is not okay. To actually have someone call him out on being such a weirdo to her and constantly wanting her approval. Like, that's another point of discussion we could have with these characters. Could be interesting. Yeah, like Mahiru just has enough and she drags him aside and reads him the riot act. I just think it'd be really cool to have Sonia be more of a support role. Like if Chiaki did end up being the first casualty and Sonia ends up filling that role, that'd be really neat. Plus it would make everybody who ships Hajime and Sonia really happy. Yeah, Mahiru would also be a good choice too. I think so. She is really smart. Like, she's very, like, you know, down to earth in her observations. Sonia tends to get underestimated a lot, but part of a real princess is having responsibilities and leadership skills, not just being pampered all the time. Yeah, for real. Like, I actually think that a lot of it comes down to the fact that she is a princess, so she feels like she has to conduct herself and seem like she's in control most of the time. Because the only time she really lets her guard down, up until like the later chapters, is near the end of her free time events with Hajime, where she actually cries to him about how she wants to go home and be with her family and see her people and her country again. Which is very human. And I like that a lot. But at the same time, you know, I talked about this with TA too. I want more character development, but I don't want that character development to come at the expense of some other character's development. Like, I don't want another character vilified for the sake of someone else's storyline. Like, I understand why people don't like Kazuichi, and who would prefer if he were, like, a casualty or something. But I don't know. I don't really like that. I don't want him to be villainized just for that. I would prefer if he got an actual arc over it. Well, you know, Hajime didn't even want to be there in that scene. He got kind of dragged along with it, because Kazuichi wouldn't stop hounding him over it. So, I think it'd be nice if we got an arc for him that got him to really tone it down and stop being, you know, such a weirdo. And actually talked more about his paranoia and his difficulties with trusting people. Because that is a major part of his free time events that I think a lot of people really overlook. You know, make him a more dynamic character. Don't just make him like a joke character. That kind of thing. You know, my issues really tend to come down to when characters are reduced to singular or very limited traits for the sake of, like, comedy or plot development or whatever. Yeah, I would like to see more from Teru as well, where we actually get to hear about his family, we get to hear about, you know, his actual motivations, and not just him making perverse comments about everybody, and the nosebleeds, and all that. You know, let characters who didn't get the spotlight actually have some spotlight time. Yeah, because you're gonna end up having a lot of characters who get a bit sidelined because we have some, you know. Yeah, we got some good development with Fuyuhiko. We saw how he really works as a character. So, I don't think it would be bad if we got someone else in his role. Oh. Sorry if you can hear that, that's my phone again. Let's put that there. So yeah, 60 characters is a lot. So I don't think I'd be averse to, like, one route focusing, like the canon route focusing on the characters who do survive mainly to the end. and the other route focusing on the other characters who got sidelined during that. So, maybe we would have more focus on characters like Teru Teru, the Imposter, Ibuki, Hiyoko, Kazuichi, and Peko. I think that'd be cool. Yeah, Mahiru. Like, Mahiru takes up Chiaki's mantle, maybe. Where she becomes, like, the support and gets all the cool scenes with Hajime. Which is gonna make that ship a lot more popular if that happens. We all know that, right? Yeah, I would love it if we actually got a major character arc for Hiyoko. And we got to see her go from a bully to someone who regrets her actions and tries to redeem herself. And I think that would really, like, add to DR2's theme of creating your own future and how she, maybe she would feel like, you know, she's done too much damage and she can't, like, make amends. But then she is like, no, I'm going to be better here on out. And, you know, I just think that'd be cool. I think that'd be a really good way to take her character. Hugh gets really tired of everyone's shit by chapter 5. Yeah. Yeah, she and Hajime are like the collective parents of the group by that point, trying to keep everybody together. Yeah, I didn't think about that. Like, Hiyoko seeing herself grown up. Like, how do you even react to that sort of thing? Especially when that's you. And also, the benefit of having more focus on Mahiru would be, okay, so I like Chiaki, I really do, but the thing with Chiaki is that in the game she doesn't really have much of a past to share. You know, she is sort of what's the term? Hang on, I'm gonna make sure I'm using this term right before I say it. Okay, so that's not what I was thinking. But, like, she's kind of, I'm not gonna say, like, she's a non-entity, but she doesn't really have a backstory to share. She doesn't really have a lot she can share in terms of motivations, which it makes sense. She's a computer program. She is an NPC. She is there to help everybody. She's part of the Neo World program, so it makes sense that she doesn't really have a history that she can share. And why that would be kept secret up until the very end when it's revealed. Whereas with Mahiru, she does have a past. She does have a family. She does have a lot of things she can share that we could learn if she were in a support role. Where, you know, it's like her things with her dad, or her comparing herself to her mom. You know, I think there's a lot of possibilities there. I think that could be really cool. Where and you know, she and Hajime both kind of have self-esteem issues in that regard. You know, she doesn't feel like her talent really measures up to everybody else. And she could talk about that with Hajime, who doesn't feel like, you know, who feels like having a talent would make him, you know, like, you know, make him worthwhile. You know, this is assuming that we do get family reveals, of course. So maybe we'll get some nuked headcanons, but maybe we won't. Yeah, probably not. I think she'll just talk about her parents in more of an abstract sense. We probably won't get names, but we're still going to. You forgot Hajime was involved in Twilight Syndrome. Wait, was he? I mean, according to Danganronpa 3, he was, but... Oh, wait, yeah. Oh, yeah, I didn't even think about this! Oh, man. Is the remake gonna include the DR3 version of Twilight Syndrome? Like, are we gonna stick to the canon version of Twilight Syndrome? Or is this gonna be a case of, like, canon rewrite, where the remake takes what DR3 established with, Natsumi, Sato, and Hajime being Reserve Corps students, and so therefore he was partially involved with all this. Oh man, that that could change a lot. Yeah, if this is gonna be a canon rewrite, that's gonna be some major changes. Because I know that in JoJo Part 4, when they did the anime adaptation, they actually included like cameos from characters who showed up later that weren't included in the manga. Like you saw foreshadowings of like Kira and the other characters that they meet along the way, like Yukiko and Keicho and Hazamada and all that. So the adaptation took what was established in canon that came earlier and brought that forward in time within the story. So chances are we might see DR3 included in this, which is going to completely rewrite everything for us again. Aren't we so happy, my fellow writers? Aren't we pleased by this idea? I mean, maybe it won't happen. Maybe we'll just get what we got before. But who knows? I don't really like how TSMC was in DR3. Yeah, I don't really either. It's very like... Yeah, I think that was the first sign that the anime was kind of going off the rails. Yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't know. Again, I'm just speculating, so I have no idea if it'll be the original or the rewritten version that's included in this. But that's something I think we should all keep in mind going forward. Because, for all we know, we might see it, like, change that way. So, especially when it's made clear that Sato and Natsumi were in the main course. Yeah. You know, there's gonna be a lot of, I think there's bound to be a lot of disagreements over which is better, you know, the original canon or the changes that they make in this upcoming one. And there's inevitably going to be discussions about it. We're probably gonna learn some new things about established characters, and people are gonna argue about that. So be primed for that sort of thing, I suppose. But it's going to give us a lot to talk about. It's going to help us, you know, definitely going to give us a lot to think about and discuss. Yeah, yeah. A lot about Twilight Syndrome murder case was. It felt like it was established, and then they said it wasn't, and they gave us something else. And it's hard to tell if that was like. So it would work within the confines of the story they wanted to tell in DR3, or if that was what was intended from the beginning. I don't know. I don't know. It's just. There's a lot that goes into it, I suppose. But, I think that's really all we can cover for now. You know, we don't really know enough to say anything definitively. But let us take a moment and, hold on. The text is always way too huge. Now it's way too small. Good enough. Alright, so. Listen, one can hope. Hmm. That too, for sure. Hmm. Oh, right. Alright, so this is what we got so far. Anything else I should add? Because I think I covered everything that we wanted to discuss today. So, I still don't really think that the new route is going to have Hajime actually, like, die. But I've been wrong before in my predictions, so who knows? Oh, yeah, that's a possibility. Yeah. Like, you introduce a new storyline and suddenly everyone thinks that means the protagonist is no longer up for the chopping block, or, like, no longer protected or whatever. But, Poi, you weren't here for this, but I explained in depth why I think Hajime is kind of safe, because he's so important to the plot. So, I don't think he's going anywhere. But I think his support might change, for all we know. So, is that everything? Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I think we covered everything so far. So, I guess we can call it here. I don't really have anything else to add. I covered everything I wanted to talk about today. I was hoping that Starby could join us today for a game or something, but he's got doctor's appointments, so we're pushing that back to tomorrow. But if you want to come by here tomorrow, we are going to be having another reaction stream, hopefully. If his health cooperates. So, I asked on my YouTube community page if there's anything else that people would like to see us react to. And, yeah, we're gonna start something new. And if not Sunday, it's gonna be another day. So, whenever we feel like we can pull it off. So, thank you everybody for stopping by today. I know this was a short one, But I'm glad we were able to discuss a lot of things in depth, and we have a whole list of things that we'd like to see, and we feel would probably be in our remake. We're probably not going to get a lot of information until November, so I guess all we can really do is speculate till then. About what? That's a surprise. So you'll have to show up tomorrow to see what it is. Sorry, I like keeping people in suspense for that kind of thing. But yeah, thank you everybody for coming by. It's always great seeing you guys. And yeah, maybe next week we'll be doing some more TDB. So keep an eye out for that as well. And until then, please be kind to yourselves and others. And be sure to have a great day. So, yeah. Bye, everybody.